What up? What up? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this podcast, we love talking about crowdfunding. We talk about how to raise money successfully on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and also using other kinds of crowdfunding like regulation crowdfunding. Really get into what other people are doing and why the heck is at work. And we'll try to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what you got to do in order to get a project funded. Now, a lot of the times on my YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel under my name, Salvador Briggman, and I also have a blog at crowdcrux.com. A lot of the times on the YouTube channel, one of the things I talk about is really just showing up and the importance of putting yourself out there. And I've seen this happen so many times over the years. You can go back to the archives of the podcast. You can see this for yourself. Listen to this with these real world interviews. People who can actually make a massive career changing shift by doing a crowdfunding campaign. And I think that today's story is actually a great example of that. So we had on an individual who for the longest time in their career was basically writing books and writing a certain type of book and a certain type of genre. And then lo and behold, they kind of had this idea. They had this idea to basically make a whole new style of game that they had never seen anywhere else. And by kind of going with that idea and believing in themselves, they were actually able to splash onto the scene. At the time of recording this, raised over $195,000 on Kickstarter from more than 5,700 backers, and really just get into and break into a whole new category that they never even imagined was possible. And you'll hear about this as well in the episode here today, how this individual was almost like breaking down and crying at one point, and just because of just how big and enormous, the incredible success that you can see there and the opportunity. So it's so cool to be able to help people along the path. It's so cool to be able to hear from people who are doing it right now, that they're in the trenches and they're delivering straight to you with things that are working, things that are working in terms of getting funding, in terms of their marketing, how they're getting backers, and advice that they can pass on because you are on the other side right now in the preparation phase. So I really hope that you enjoy today's podcast episode as we get into this deep. In addition, I think this is going to be useful for you, even if you're doing a physical product. You don't necessarily have to be doing a written publishing project or a board game or something like that. Listen to the story here because I think there's a lot of takeaways when it comes to what works with Kickstarter, how you don't actually have to have a perfect page in order to get results. I think that's actually another thing that just holds all of us back is if we feel you need to have something that's perfect. But I am very big on planning and I'm very big on doing your homework. However, at the same time, you don't have to have a perfect page in order to get results. And you'll hear about that and more when it comes to takeaways of today's project. And it's going to be very useful for you no matter what category you are launching under. In addition, I have a great free course out there that's going to walk you through step by step how to actually do one of these campaigns. So when it comes to doing a Kickstarter campaign, there's so much stuff you got to do, my friends. And I really try to condense this into a very easy to follow system. Just going step by step through this thing, knocking it out, module, lesson after lesson. And this is really something where you're going to learn how to get backers for your Kickstarter campaign. You're going to learn how to market your project. You're going to learn how to stand out on the actual Kickstarter platform, trigger the algorithm, insights into that, and more. So if you really want to go another layer deeper and really get a sense of like what you got to do in order to get successful, in order to get funded, and you really want to hear it from the horse's mouth, this is going to be a great option for you to check this out. I'll include a link right now. It's at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. Hope you enjoy that free course. You also start taking action on some of those lessons that I'm going to be sharing with you there. But without further ado, let's jump right in today's podcast episode and learn how this individual was able to raise over $190,000 on Kickstarter from more than 5,700 backers. And it's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we're speaking with a six-figure success story who has blown past their goal, been able to attract over 170,000, more than 5,000 backers for their project. And this is for Lewd Dungeon Adventures. We have the founder here today on the podcast to tell you all about it. Welcome.
Hey there.
How you doing? It's great to have you on the podcast today. Maybe you could first start with just introducing yourself to the listeners and just a little bit about what you've been working on here when it comes to your projects.
All right. My name is Phoenix Gray. I actually started as a romance author a long time ago under the pen name Sky Corrigan. For the past few years, I've been writing Lit RPG, which is a literary role-playing games. And I decided I would give it a try at making actual tabletop games, which this project actually happened by accident. My fiance and I were kind of trying to find a way to spice up things in the bedroom a little bit. And I like tabletop RPGs, and I thought it'd be really cool if I created one with a few elements to make things a bit sexier. And we played it, and he loved it, and he was like, "You've got to make this for everyone." So that's kind of the backstory on how this came to be a thing.
And did you ever create games before this? This is your first one. Have you ever tried making one, or it sounds like you were able to just create that pretty quickly?
I have actually made one before. I made one for my series, The Realm Between, but I never actually published it. So I had a little bit of experience before doing this, but I'd never taken a game fully to market before.
And you guys have that incredible experience. It's obviously a bonding moment. Where was that thought in your mind? Where did that come from of going that next layer deeper of actually deciding to create a whole project around that? Because that's a really big commitment.
The original game that I created for him is definitely not as complex as what the actual project that's on Kickstarter is. The original project was pretty basic, where there was just specific sex acts to open doors and chests. But I've taken it a step farther with this game, and there are things that you have to do to actually move the game along, some of which require props. So it's quite a bit more in depth, and also trying to make it a game for everyone, because I also realized that some people might be interested in this playing it with friends. So I've made it to where it can be completely converted into a drinking game. There's also refractory periods that you have to take into consideration. So there are modifications for even dice rolling and just being able to switch up your experience mid-game so that it works best for you and your partner and whoever you're playing the game with.
And for those that don't have it in front of them, is this kind of a dungeon game? What's the style of game that you'd say that you've created where people can play this?
So it's definitely a fantasy-inspired dungeon crawler. Pretty much every campaign book is going to feature a dungeon or some type of fantasy scenario that players will have to work their way through.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So you have this great idea, and you obviously talked about this, with your fiance. When did Kickstarter begin to enter the picture, or when did you really consider maybe doing a campaign for this?
Originally, I actually wasn't going to do a Kickstarter for this. Again, I come from an author background, so I was just going to publish it on all the ebook retailers and go with it. But a bunch of my author friends, books are now becoming a big thing in Kickstarter, and they're like, "Hey, you really need to kickstart this because games do pretty well with Kickstarter." So that's when I actually decided to take it to Kickstarter, because I was like, well, it can't hurt. And I didn't realize how many illustrations go into these games when I started it, which also ended up becoming an issue where I actually would need to kickstart it, because custom illustrations are expensive and games like this have a lot of them. So that's when I was like, okay, I 100% have to kickstart this to make it the best product that I possibly can.
And was this a year ago for you, 6 months? When did you really make that decision to go with Kickstarter and to really start that process?
No, it's actually kind of crazy. I probably thought about this 3 months ago.
Wow.
I know a lot of people, yeah, everything I've read and a lot of people I've heard from say it takes about a year to plan a Kickstarter, but I planned this a month before I started the pre-sale page on this. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to get this off the ground. I actually read a book which isn't quite specific to Kickstarters, but it's called Get Your Book Selling on Kickstarter by Monica Leonel, I believe, and Russell Nohelty. It's specifically about getting books launched on Kickstarter. But I read that and kind of took some advice from that. And so when my pre-launch page started, that's when I actually began building my mailing list to get the project going. So it was a very, very short timeline.
That's super exciting. And it does sound like the people around you were also passionate and kind of supportive, right, of you doing a project like this.
Yeah. I've definitely had some help from people along the way. Thea Sharp she kickstarted her series. of books on there, and she's given me a lot of good advice. So Jellup, who's marketing the campaign, they've also given me a lot of good advice. So I've had a pretty good support system going into this.
I don't know if you consider yourself an artist or a creator, but for you, what's the most exciting part of the process? Is it kind of like coming up with the idea? Is it executing implementation? Do you love the story aspect? Like what part to you are you most passionate about?
My favorite part is writing the actual campaigns because I go into it with an idea of what I'm going to do, and I have a few ideas of what I specifically want to do with the intimacy scenarios. But much like with writing books, as I go along, I'll find inspiration while I'm writing, and I'll come up with even better ideas and cooler things to add in. So anytime I'm writing one of these campaign books and I come across a scenario where I'm like, oh, I could add this and it's going to be so cool and everybody's going to love this and it's going to be amazing, that's when I get the most excited.
So you've been doing that for a while. You mentioned like 5 years. What were you doing before that? Or was that your full-time gig? Or what was happening before that, just out of curiosity?
So I've been self-publishing full-time for 10 years. I've been in the book space on Amazon and all the other ebook retailers, specifically writing fantasy for, I want to say, the past 3 to 5 years. But yeah, so I've got a pretty big background in the book industry.
That's awesome. And I think that's such a big thing to celebrate as well, because there are so many people who are very creative the way that you are, but struggle to kind of put the nitty gritty together when it comes to like specifics related to the project or taking action. Why do you feel like you're different in that way? Is it that you're wired differently or just your habits are different? Why do you feel like you can take these creative ideas and really execute on them?
Part of it's because I'm a workaholic, which my fiance will argue is not always a good thing. But yeah, I just like having the creative outlet, and it's real easy for me to just sit down and work on a project and get it done from start to finish because I don't really have any hobbies. Work is my hobby. I actually love what I do for a living. I love writing books. I've loved making this game. So it makes me want to actually work on it, which is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally relate with that. But it's also when you're very passionate, it's almost like it's not work, like you said, right? It's kind of like a calling almost at that point.
Yeah.
So kind of fasting forward, like you are thinking of doing this campaign, you decide on it, you're getting support, you're getting things together. The night before you go live, what was kind of going through your head? What were you feeling? What were you thinking the night before you went live with it?
I'm not going to lie, I had absolutely no idea how this campaign was going to do. I certainly didn't expect the level of success that it's had. I had a number in my mind of, okay, this is what it's going to do. This is what I'd consider successful. This is what I think it could potentially do at the height of what it's going to do. But the day before, I wasn't as nervous as I thought I was going to be. It was just kind of like waiting to see what it was going to do because this has been a big career changer for me. I'm planning to work on this full time now and continue to produce campaigns. So yeah, it was kind of a really big deal.
And in terms of those numbers, like what were you thinking just out of your head? Like if you could get to like this number, I consider at least decent. Like what were you thinking?
So for me to consider the project even a minor success, I was hoping to get to 10K, which is incredibly small compared to what it's done. My realistic estimation of what I thought it might do once Jellup got on board, because I've heard, I'm not sure how true this is, but I've heard on Reddit whatnot that they usually won't take campaigns that they don't think will do less than 6 figures. So then I was like, I poured over all their numbers and I was like, okay, this might do like 60, 70K. But yeah, I certainly didn't expect what it has done. So that's been way more than I could have ever hoped for.
So you launch, you go live, you're getting people funding this. After the first week, what was that like? Like where were you at in terms of backers or like, a funding amount, ballpark? Like where were you at after the first week?
After the first week, I realized it was going to be really big. I've been watching it on KickTrack, and BackerKit also has a like an estimation tool where you can see where your Kickstarter might fund. But when I realized how big it was going to be, I remember my fiance and I were driving to take a little night off, and I literally cried. I started crying in my car because I realized that it was going to do 6 figures. And it was just such a life-changing thing for me. Of course, there was also bits of fear that still come in here and there about distribution and production because, again, this is a lot bigger of a project than I thought it was going to be. But I think I have that pretty well handled. But still, just imagining the scope of the project is super intimidating at times, for sure.
Why do you think that moment, that realization was so emotional for you?
It was emotional for me because I feel like this is a game changer for my career. I haven't seen anything like this game on the market, and I plan to take it all the way to retail. I want it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I want to get it out as far as it can be. And I think this can be a very lucrative long-term business for me. So that's very exciting for me.
It sounds like as well kind of another form factor for your storytelling, your ability to interact with people when people are playing a game. You're having those moments, right? Around the world, people are experiencing that as couples and like getting together. And I think that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, it is exciting to have so many people wanting to play, and just even the feedback I've gotten from people that have played the starter adventure, because it's the starter adventure is actually currently available on a drive-through RPG right now. It's the non-color version. It's kind of like the very basic version before I add all the illustrations and everything. But the people that have come back to me and have played that said they've enjoyed that a lot. So that's also really fulfilling, because the ultimate goal is for everybody who plays this to have a great time.
Mhm.
So I'm always happy when I can make something that others enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the takeaways we were talking about in pre-interview, and I think a lot of people kind of suffer from this, is this like need for perfectionism before you go live. And it sounds like you kind of had a lesson there that you realized when it comes to making your page perfect. Do you think you can just expand on that?
Yeah, so I am not going to lie. My Kickstarter page is not the best. When I compared it to other 5e campaigns and like tabletop RPG campaigns, and even campaigns that didn't fund for anywhere near as good as much as mine has, their graphics are spot on. They have a lot of custom graphics. Everything is flawless. And my page is not so perfect. Of course, I didn't have like a large budget for a whole bunch of custom illustrations. And the game didn't already have the illustrations. That's why I'm kickstarting it. So I kind of had to use the two cover illustrations that I did have, and then Photoshop a bunch of stuff from stock photos and just use
Mhm.
my own Photoshop skills to put this page together. So it's far from perfect. And because of that, I thought it was going to hurt the Kickstarter, honestly. But it doesn't seem to have really hurt it that much, if at all. So I don't think your page has to be perfect to be successful.
I think that's such an incredible lesson too, because a lot of the times we don't always have access to the full-fledged resources like a huge company would, right? So I guess the question from in my mind is like, in your observation, why do you feel like despite maybe not having all the bells and whistles with the page, you were still able to connect? Is it just as simple as people wanted to play the game? Why do you feel like they connected with this?
I think it really boils down to there's nothing quite like it on the market. It connects with the Dungeons and Dragons audience, which has, of course, been growing with between Stranger Things and the movie being about to come out. And then again, just really the lack of anything like this on the market. I've been on Amazon looking for something similar, which is part of the reason why I created this. And I just couldn't find anything that kind of filled a desire that I had. So
Mhm.
ultimately, I made it for me without the intentions of ever making this a public thing. And it's something that people want, apparently.
Yes, the unique quality. And I love that lesson as well. Like when you notice something that you want or a problem that you have and solving that, chances are there are tons of people out there around the world that might experience that same problem, right? Or might want to enjoy that same solution which you've come up with. So that's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my thought process as well.
Kind of on the point of international, I know that like the idea or the concept being able to sell to people around the world is so incredibly exciting. And you got tons of people now that are you're going to be able to play their game or they're going to be able to play your game. Or you have like 5,000 people plus. At the same time, there's like different things related to shipping and costs. What's one of the lessons you learned related to that you could pass on to listeners?
So I had no idea about customs when I started this. I have shipped things internationally before on a very, very small scale. So I always just assume that you go to the post office and you're like, I want to ship this internationally, and you pay for everything right up front. And so then the customer gets their product and they don't have to worry anything. Well, what I didn't know was that with customs, especially in EU, that the customer often gets charged after the product gets imported into the EU. So that's been a little bit of a challenge because I had no idea. And unfortunately, this time around, I hadn't really prepared for that.
Mm.
So I feel like I wish I would have researched that more and knew more about that in advance. That's just honestly a little bit of ignorance on my part for not doing that due diligence. But I'm sure even after the campaign ends, there might be a few little challenges with that, but I'm not too worried about getting through it. But it's kind of unknown territory for me. And I think for those that are getting ready to launch Kickstarter, the more you know about it before you launch your Kickstarter, the better, because you are going to get a ton of questions about it.
Yeah, and I do think it's actually something that's super difficult to predict, and you don't know how big the crowd's going to be either, right? So all of a sudden, you discover you got thousands of people, right, and they're on all these different countries, and then you kind of have to kind of scramble and like figure that out in real time. But
Yeah.
how have other people in your life been reacting to your success so far? Like, what have you been telling people about this? Like, how have they been reacting?
Yeah, everybody's been pretty proud and excited about it. Of course, everybody looks at the money aspect of it and they just assume I'm going to be rolling in money after this, but that's not exactly the case because a lot of it goes into production costs and, getting everything sent out to people. But I haven't had anybody not support me in this. Mostly everybody's been really
Yeah,
excited.
I mean, I can definitely imagine that response. I think the other one is like you've been able to very successfully, it sounds like, begin a transition from doing the writing full time to now creating a product. Do you ever wonder if you should have done this sooner, or has that ever been on your mind?
Well, it kind of has because it took me a year to actually create this. I created the original one a year ago, and I didn't get brought up until a lot more recently when I was like, okay, I'm actually going to make this into a product. But I also believe that things kind of happen when they're supposed to happen. So I wouldn't change anything at this point. I think it's coming out at the time it needed to come out at.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, one other quick question I had on the tactics front was you mentioned working with other partners. And I think that's always a little bit scary, right? Like if you're a new beginning creator, going and working with someone beyond just yourself, it can be kind of intimidating. What made you decide to work with other people to help promote and market your projects?
So it really came down to, especially working with Jelp, it really came down to me not really being 100% sure how to promote a Kickstarter. I've promoted books with Facebook ads in the past, and I thought that I could do it myself, but I knew that Jelp has like a really good history of being able to get stuff like this off the ground. So I decided to reach out to them. I also reached out to BackerKit, but BackerKit did not bite on it, but Jelp said they would. Of course, I'm actually paying for the marketing for it out of my own pocket right now, but they're handling it. And they've done
Mhm.
a really, really good job. There was a point where I tried to do some of the marketing for it myself, and my return on investment was just nowhere near what theirs was. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hands off because they clearly know what they're doing better than I would. So I'm going to trust them with this and let them go with it.
Makes sense. So it kind of sounds like you took a stab at it first, and then when you identified that that wasn't your skill set for this one, then you got help, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm the type of person, I was just going to say, it's really hard for me to let go of the reins on many things, but that was definitely the right move.
yeah, I mean, I relate with that as well, especially when you have like it's your baby, right? You've been working on it for a while, and you don't want someone else to misrepresent you, right? Or you want to make sure that
Yeah.
it's done right. It can kind of be difficult to do that as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So, when it comes to this campaign, are you going to be going into in demand? Are you going to be offering this on another site or something like that? I know you have 6 days to go here with your project. What are your plans for the future here?
So my next stretch goal, which is at the 200K mark, is to get it into big retailers. My goal is to approach Spencer's Gifts with it, to approach Adam and Eve, and to try to get it into Barnes and Noble. I do know kind of the logistics of getting it into Spencer's and Barnes and Noble. Not quite sure about Adam and Eve yet, but the goal would be to eventually make it like a really big thing where you could walk into one of these stores and just pick it up off the shelves. Of course, I also want to have it for sale on all the ebook retailers, both in ebook version, because I don't really see tabletop RPGs in ebook version,
Mhm.
but also in a soft cover so that people can buy it however they would like to buy it. But there will be many campaign books in the future. This has been successful enough that I want to make many, many, many campaign books for this. So
Awesome, awesome. So one question I had for you, just kind of looking through your marketing, I'm not sure if this is conscious or not, but you do a really interesting job of branding your personality, right? So like Phoenix Gray, right? Is that something that's conscious, or you've always enjoyed having pen names and that kind of stuff?
I would say it's not really conscious. Having pen names is just something you kind of do as an author. I have many, but Phoenix Gray isn't the only one. It's my big one right now for sure. But yeah, I would definitely say it's not really a conscious thing beyond the actual creation of the pen name.
And when you're thinking about that, are you thinking about the effect that you want to have? Because like Phoenix Gray is such a cool sounding name, right? And I do think it kind of as well pairs well with like Lewd Dungeon. Do you think about that, like the branding at all?
Yes. So I did want a more like fantasy feeling pen name when I moved into Lit RPG, which is when I actually created this particular pen name. But it definitely translated well over for Lewd Dungeon Adventures too. And I wanted Lewd Dungeon Adventures connected to Phoenix Gray, and because I have already written literary RPG, which is game-like books or books that take place in like a game world. So
Awesome.
it connects pretty well.
Looking at the project, and you've had like a wild roller coaster for the last 3 months. I mean, you obviously started with this idea, and then you're taking action on this, and you're getting things together, and then it's like a huge success. So you've had a really big roller coaster here. Do you feel like there's anything that you would have done differently, or anything you would have improved on, or if you could go back in time, would there be anything that you would do differently?
I think I would have planned out my stretch goals a little bit better, because initially my initial stretch goals were only planned to about 50,000, which, if I'm being 100% transparent, is why you see stretch goals at $5,000 interviews towards the beginning of the campaign, and now it's at $25,000 interviews or intervals towards the end of the campaign, because I didn't plan for this level of success, if I'm being completely honest. So one of my biggest pieces of advice, if I would give to anybody that's doing a Kickstarter, is, I don't know how positive this is going to sound, but plan for success, but expect failure. And that way you'll be ready for it if it's big, but you won't be disappointed if it's not.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And just having that ambition as well to dream big is hard. It's hard to just be willing to set your sights on such a big goal like that, right?
Yeah,
but it's definitely
for
possible.
sure.
So, I mean, we're coming to the end of the interview here. I guess one other question I have before we kind of get to the ending one would be, I think one thing that's interesting you're doing with this is that you're really encouraging couples to interact in a different way, right? And I think that that's really the first time, at least I've seen that within this particular niche. Do you feel like that's something that's just needed more in our modern era? It's like more fun ways for couples to interact with games and that kind of stuff?
I do think so, and I know a lot of couples that play tabletop RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, and I also know that people in long-term relationships struggle with keeping things fresh and intimate. So why not combine people's passions to make something super fun that's also going to enhance their relationships?
Do you think it could also be where like one person's into tabletop gaming and this is a way to like involve their significant other as well in that hobby?
Yes, because funny enough, my fiance is actually not a big fan of tabletop RPGs, but he'll play this one. He loves this one.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So where can people go to learn more? Where can they check out your site, or should they go on Kickstarter? Where can they go to learn more about your project here?
So I do have a website, which is at lewddungeonadventures.com. And then, of course, the Kickstarter is still going on, which you can find under the same name. Those would probably be the two easiest places to find out about the Kickstarter and about the future projects for sure.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being really candid, transparent, sharing some of the anxiety you've had, sharing the incredible success, some of the tips, advice. Really appreciate that. My final question for you, and we can end on this note, is if you can speak directly to the listeners, and we can end on either a quote that you like, a word of encouragement, a final tip, something you wish you knew, or anything related to that, and we can end on that note.
So my advice is, if you are passionate about something, even if it's just a hobby, put it out there in the world. You never know who else might enjoy it and love it, and you might be able to turn it into more than a hobby. Definitely believe in yourself. You may think you're the only person in the world who likes this thing, but I guarantee there are other people who like the thing that you like. So that'd be my advice.
Awesome. Phoenix Gray, thanks for coming on the show, and look forward to your future success.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for tuning into this episode and investing a little bit in terms of your education, really showing up and just being willing to become a learner. Becoming a lifelong learner is such an important trait. It's such a huge asset when you can learn from other people. And this is something that I was so passionate about. I started my podcast back in 2015, started my blog in 2012. And I was so passionate about bringing these stories to you because I think it's really different when you can actually hear from someone directly what's happening right now live. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is actually still a thing. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe these things work in order to get funds. It's almost like you have a light bulb moment that goes off. And then all of a sudden you're like, what if I actually did something like this? What if I actually went out there and I put out my product, my campaign? What if I really just followed some of these principles that can get you funded and I was willing to take action? Now, over the years, I've realized that that's kind of a scary thing to do. It's a little bit scary, right? To put yourself out there. It's a little bit scary because you don't know the road ahead. You don't know what you don't know going into this process. And when I started to realize that, obviously I would continue to grow all of my different products when it comes to like my books and my courses and stuff like that. And I really try to put out really good, high quality education information. But one of the other things I do is one-on-one coaching. And these are basically intensive, full-fledged coaching calls going step by step through what you need to do in order to launch a campaign. You can think of this almost as like you can take all of the information, all of the archives, all the campaigns that I've seen, the things that I've seen work, and apply all of that to your campaign. So it really speeds up the process tremendously, as well as kind of gives you a little bit of what you are missing, right, with your campaign. What are some of the things you haven't thought of? Sometimes we just have those blinders on and we really don't know whether or not we're on the right path. You might be listening to podcasts, you might be listening to my YouTube videos, you might be actually reading my book, even the Kickstarter launch formula, but you're still like, I don't know, like, am I still on the right path? So that's why I make myself available with these one-on-one intensive coaching calls where we can talk about your strategy. We can go in depth and give you feedback as well. These are really meant to be extremely useful for you. And I've had so many people just come away, they literally get 10 times, if not 20 times of value out of these calls and really sets them on the right track. As well as I also do long-term coaching. I have long-term coaching programs. I have a bunch of other stuff that I do. Sometimes occasionally will help with execution on a project. So there's a lot of great stuff there behind the scenes. But if you do want to check this out, go to this link at crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching. You can go there and you can learn more about my options there. In addition, I'll leave you with one kind of note. And I think that when it comes to this, first of all, I am so proud that you are showing up, that you are taking action, that you're really focused on your success, what you got to do, moving yourself forward. I think the more that you can really turn your life into a learning center, the more that you can become a student of this and student of other people, the more likely you are to see success because it becomes just less scary and it becomes less uncertain about different elements of the process. So it would mean so much to me if you do enjoy what I do in terms of my passion, what I do in terms of putting out my content. If you leave a positive rating and review on iTunes, that would mean a ton for me. It would mean the world as well because other people get to see that. They get to see it's worth their time to actually invest a little bit when it comes to, actually showing up and listening and being a fly on the wall and really being able to download all this information into their head. So thank you so much if you decide to do that. But again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you take action this week and I will see you next time.